Hello everyone. Last class, we studied chapter number 5, respiration. Today, we will focus on the chapter number 5, another subtopic called transportation. So, here in the transportation, which is included transportation in human beings and transportation in plants. Let's start. So, here some of the key concepts which are included in transportation. We are going to learn our pump that is nothing but heart. Next, the fluid connective tissue, blood. Oxygen enters the blood in the lungs, blood pressure. The tubes is nothing but the blood vessels. We will learn in the form of the blood vessels are arteries and veins and capillaries, maintenance by the platelets. And another important subtopic is the lymph. And along with this entire content, we are going to learn transportation in plants. That is also very, very important. So let us start with the first one. Today, you will learn the name and describe the main parts of the human circulatory system. Means, especially, we will focus on that heart, and even we will describe the role of that heart, blood, and blood vessels. And along with this entire that transportation in human beings, we will study the transportation in plants also. The human circulatory system, we have seen in previous sections that blood transports food, oxygen, and waste materials in our bodies. So in class 9th, we studied about the blood. It is a fluid connective tissue. Blood consists of the fluid medium called the plasma, in which we can see that all the blood cells. And what is the function of the plasma here? The plasma function is transports food, carbon dioxide, nitrogenous waste in dissolved form. Here you can see the blood. We can inside the blood, as we know that the blood is the fluid connective tissue, in which we can see that red blood cells. And what is the function of the red blood cells? We studied in the respiration, the red blood cells, which is have that respiratory pigment called that hemoglobin, which have that ability to bind with that oxygen, and this oxygen is carried out by the red blood cells. And even we can see that white blood cells, platelets, and the plasma. So this is that component of the blood. So here it's a very important. Oxygen is carried by the red blood cells mainly, and many other substances like salt are also transported by the blood. We thus need a pumping organ to pump blood around the body. As we know that like the blood is a fluid connective tissue, just like the liquid or the water. So how the water will move one place to another place? It that the fluid needs some of the support in the form of the pumping organ. That pumping organ which is helping to pump the blood one place to the another place, especially the blood has to be reach each and every part of the body. That pumping organ is nothing but what is the pumping organ here? Our pump is that heart. As we know that the heart, it works as a pump to move the blood around the body, and it has that four chambers, especially the humans and animals, and it consists of that four mm, chambers. We can call it as, we can see that upside two chambers and downside two chambers, or even we can call it as left to right also. So here you can see the right atrium, that upper portion. Your like just to carry, if you face towards the mm, laptop, your left will be right, right will be left. Just you can imagine your face in front of the mirror. So we have to identify the parts of the heart. Just imagine ourselves in front of the mirror, like as we can see the left, we will see in the mirror right, we will see the in the mirror left, like that. The first part is right atrium, and down one right ventricle, again upside one left atrium and left ventricle. And here, as we know that this we studied from the lower grades, that heart is that muscular organ, and which is as big as our fist. And we can see this picture in our textbook, that is a 5.10, because both oxygen and the carbon dioxide have to be transported by the blood itself only. Means that heart, which is helping to transport even oxygen and the carbon dioxide also. The heart has the different chambers to prevent that oxygen-rich blood from mixing with the blood containing carbon dioxide. Like just you can think of ourselves, even we in our body we will see that the blood which consisting of more percentage of the oxygen, and even we can see the blood which is consisting of more percentage of that carbon dioxide. Is it these two, oxygen and carbon dioxide blood, which is there in that one place together? No. In our heart, as we learn, it has a four chambers. Like one part is helping to transport only oxygenated blood from the heart to the each and every part of the body, and another part which is helping to receive the carbon dioxide blood from the body parts to the heart. So here this portion, the parts, the name of the parts of the heart, it's very important. Each and every part, um, most of the time, which will ask for the picture-based question. So first you can see the pulmonary artery and pulmonary veins, left atrium, left ventricle, septum, right ventricle, vena cava from the lower body, right atrium, vena cava from the upper body, and aorta. So here we have to remember, so that oxygenated blood which is coming from the lungs which is carried by the pulmonary veins. So what is the function of the pulmonary vein? That only vein which will carry that oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. So the pulmonary veins which is carrying that oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart, later which is enter into the left atrium to the left ventricle, then which will come out from that heart, that big artery called that aorta, from that aorta to the, which will segregate into the different blood vessels in the form of that arteries. The arteries will carry that oxygenated blood, and even we can call it as artery will help to transport the oxygenated blood from each and every part of the body. And along with this, we can see here pulmonary arteries. So the pulmonary arteries are the one which is carrying deoxygenated blood from heart to the lungs. So here you can see the vena cava from the lower body. What do you mean by the lower body? Means the lower portion of the body, whatever the deoxygenated blood which is there, which is carried by the veins which is connected to the large blood vessels called that vena cava, and which is helping to collect deoxygenated blood from the lower parts to the heart. Later, even we can see that vena cava from the upper body. Like what is the function of that upper body of vena cava, which is collecting deoxygenated blood from the upper portion that will enter into the right atrium, then right atrium to the right ventricle to the blood vessel, big blood vessels called the pulmonary artery, which will carry the deoxygenated blood from heart to the lungs. Why it is reaching to the lungs, the deoxygenated blood? Because the deoxygenated blood will consist of more percentage of that carbon dioxide. We studied in the last session, breathing, removal of like that waste material. Whenever the glucose is breaking down, that carbon dioxide will produce that which is coming out in the form of whenever you breathe out. That is the reason the pulmonary arteries are the one which is carrying the deoxygenated blood in the form of dissolved form that will absorb in the lungs, and the lungs to the alveoli, alveoli to the bronchi, bronchi to the trachea. That carbon dioxide blood will come out from this one. Next. So this is we already studied. Once you can see this one, the first one here you have to just focus on the numbering, then you will understand what is the function of this one. The first one is the right atrium takes in blood carrying carbon dioxide, that is even we can call it as carbon dioxide contained blood at the deoxygenated blood. Next, the two is that blood is squeezed down into the right ventricle and taken to the lungs where oxygen replaces carbon dioxide. This we learn. Next, we can see 3 and 4. What is the number of 3? Left atrium. What is the number of 4? Left ventricle. Here, you have to remember the figure number 5.1, the schematic representation of transport and exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Whatever I explained just now, this is the representation of whatever we learned so far. As I said, the pulmonary vein will carry the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart, and hearts to the that oxygenated blood will reach to the first aorta and later to body and artery, artery to the blood capillaries in body organs. Later, whatever by utilizing this oxygen, we studied in the respiration, the glucose is breaking down into the carbon dioxide, water, and energy. That carbon dioxide will carried veins from the body parts, which will reach to the vena cava to the right atrium. From the right atrium to the right ventricle to the pulmonary arteries are the one which is carrying that deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs, and there that carbon dioxide will remove from the lungs. Later again, whenever you inhale oxygen, which will mix up with that blood and which will reach again the same continuation process will takes place here. And coming to this one, since ventricles have to pump the blood into various organs, they have thicker muscular walls than the atria do. Are you able to understand this word? This is very important. Sometime it will come for your MCQ question. If you see that heart, we can see the down portion, the ventricle portion has a thicker wall. So what is the reason behind it? Because whenever that ventricle contractions will takes place, then only the blood which is there in the heart, which will pump out from the heart, which will help to reach each and every part of the body. Since in heavy pressurely manner, very forcible manner, the down portion has to be contraction has to be takes place. That's the reason the ventricle has the thicker muscular walls when compared to the atria. So here even we can see the valves which are present between atria and ventricle, which is ensure that the blood does not flow back when the atria or ventricles contract. No, just you can imagine we have that four chambers. If that ventricles closes, if the ventricle close, what would happen? That upper atrium, the blood, whatever which is there inside that ventricle, there is a chance to move into the atrium. To prevent the backflow, we have that valves which is helping to prevent the backflow of the blood. Let us learn once, just check that the parts which are there in the heart. It is a simple one. By seeing this one, we can able to identify from the body parts to the deoxygenated blood, which is entering to the right atrium to the right ventricle, and right ventricle to the lungs. Later, from the lungs, oxygenated blood, which is entering to the left atrium to the ventricle, left ventricle to the aorta to the entire body parts. Now, here, as we learn, the separation means we studied the heart have that four, the heart has that four chambers. The separation of right side and the left side of that heart is useful to keep oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing. So the purpose of having four chamber heart is is especially which is helping to not mixing that oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood. Such separation allows a highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body. This is useful in animals that have that high energy needs, such as birds, mammals, which can constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. And this is also very important. In animals that do not use energy for this purpose, and the body's temperature depends on the temperature in the environment, means the mammals, the four chamber heart organisms, they can maintain the body temperature, but they can maintain the body temperature, but the animals that do not use that much energy, and the body temperature depend on the temperature in the environment. Just you can imagine, if you have that the temperature, especially that human beings, if you have the temperature very high and low, also we have that. If we are the normal human being, we have the normal temperature itself only. Okay, but here the some of the another organism which will that body temperature which is depending on the environment. Such animals like amphibians or many reptiles have three chamber hearts, and tolerate some mix of that oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood. The three chamber organisms are that mammals and the reptiles. So how can we see the three chambered heart? We can see that two left and right atrium and only one ventricle. And this is also very important. Coming to the fishes, on the other hand, have only two chambered heart to their hearts, and the blood is pumped to the gills, is oxygenated there, and the passes directly to the rest of the body. Thus, the blood goes only once through the heart in the fish during one cycle of passing through the body. Here in fishes, we can see that single circulatory system, which we can see since it has the two chambered heart, only the blood flows in the heart only one time. Means just you can see that if the oxygenated blood which is moving here, the red color one which will move only one time. So here, whenever the fish will takes that water through the mouth, which will reach to the gills, there the dissolved oxygen will utilized by the gills, and that oxygenated blood which reach into the each and every part of the body, and the deoxygenated blood which is entering into the atrium and ventricle, and that deoxygenated blood which is coming out here. This is the single circulatory system we can see in the fishes, but in the humans and the mammals, especially the vertebrates, we can see that the specific type of the phenomenon called the double circulation. The double circulation is nothing but mm, the heart, like the blood, inside that heart, enter into the heart two times in one circle. So the proper definition of the double circulation is the process during which the blood passes twice through the heart during one complete cycle. This type of circulation is found in birds and mammals, as in them the heart is completely divided into the four chamber heart and the right atrium and the right ventricle and the left atrium and the left ventricle. Once you can see this, the animated video, like that oxygenated blood which is reaching one time into the blood, again which the same oxygenated blood which is reaching to the each and every part of the body, again that the same oxygen blood which is consisting of that more percentage of the carbon dioxide which is entering again into the heart. Means one cycle, the blood which is entering into the heart two times, that we can call it as double circulation. And here, this is also very important, blood pressure. As we know that in general, the blood pressure, the BP is nothing but 120 by 80, 120 by 80. What do you mean by that 120 by 80? How we will identify that 120 by 80? How we can say that the person has that BP, high BP, low BP? So here the force, the BP means the blood pressure means the force that blood exerts against the walls of vessels is called blood pressure. Means whenever the blood flows into the blood vessels, which will exert some pressure on the walls, that we can call it as blood pressure. Means how can we see this? How can we tell that blood pressure is 120 by 80? Here we can see that the pressure of the blood inside the arteries during the ventricle systole. So again, I'm repeating my lines. The Here you can see the pressure of the blood inside the artery during the ventricle systole. The systole is nothing but contraction of ventricle. Now you tell me, this is a systole one. Whenever that ventricle contraction takes place, can we see that the pressure on the arteries are very high or low? We are just pushing down. Contraction is taking place down in the ventricle side. So what is the percentage of the pressure on the walls in arteries? Yes, definitely it is high, that we can see the systolic pressure is 120 mm of Hg. And this is called that ventricle systole, even we can call it as systolic pressure. The pressure in the artery during the ventricle systole. And even we can see the pressure in the artery during the ventricle diastole. Diastole means the same ventricle which will takes place in the form of relaxation. Means there is no contraction is happening. This we can call it as diastolic pressure. So just you can imagine, if it is no contraction is taking place, can we see that more pressure on the blood vessels and the arteries? Definitely no. Definitely no. That's the reason we can see that the diastolic pressure is 80. So the normal blood pressure is 120 by 80 is nothing but systolic pressure and the diastolic pressure. And the next one, it's important one. So far we studied the heart, the four chambers, and how that heart is helping to pump the blood from the heart to the entire body parts, and from the body parts, the deoxygenated blood which is carried by the veins, and which is reaching to the heart. Here, the whatever that entire circulation, the transportation which is happening inside that body, which is connected to the heart 100%, which we can see in the form of the blood vessels. And the blood vessels are nothing but the tubes, the blood vessels. We can see in the form of three types: arteries, veins. Even we can see that here you can see the capillaries. The arteries are the blood vessels which carry blood away from the heart. Actually, this word is very important. Here we are not mentioning the word called the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood. So here the blood vessels called the arteries. Arteries are the vessels which carry the blood away from the heart to the various organs of the body. And here, since the blood emerges from the heart under that high pressure, definitely like whenever the ventricle systole will takes place, that high pressure will be there in the arteries that carries that the arteries have the thick and elastic walls. What is the purpose of having this thick and elastic walls? Since the blood which is flowing, this red color one is that arteries. Inside the arteries, the blood which is flowing in the form of that high pressure. That's the reason which has that high thick walls and elastic and thick walls which we can see. And even we have that another blood vessel called vein or the veins. The function of the veins collect the blood from the different organs and brings it back to the heart. They do not need thick walls because why the veins they do not need thick walls? Because there is a no longer there is a no longer under the pressure, because the blood which is flowing in this, you can see in the blue color, the blood which is flowing in the veins, which we cannot see much pressure. Okay, so instead of that, we can see that in the veins we have that valves that ensure that the blood flows only in one direction. So what is the purpose of having that valves here? Here you can see just the gate-like structures. The veins having that thin wall, but it has that valves like the gate-like structure. So what is the purpose of having this one? Which is helping to prevent the backflow of deoxygenated or the carbon dioxide blood. Just you can imagine whatever that waste material which is present in the deoxygenated blood, which is going back, means which will damage our tissue or the cells. That's the reason we have that the valves which is helping to prevention of backflow, and even which is helping to flow only one direction. So this is the summary of the artery and veins and the capillaries. The capillaries are the one which will connect to the arteries and the veins. Actually, these capillaries are associated with the cell. So whatever that oxygen which is carrying that arteries and which will reach to the cell through the capillaries. And again, the whatever the byproduct which is um, uh, liberating inside the cell, which will that carbon dioxide will carried by that capillaries to the veins, and veins to the vena cava to the heart. So this we already studied. So sometime it's a 2 marks question. The board examination is asking the differentiation between arteries and veins. And if these four are the four, we can say simply for differentiation of arteries and veins. Even I kept that the arteries versus vein. And the next one, the maintenance by platelets. So what happen if the system of tubes develops a leak, like as we studied the blood vessels in the form of the arteries and veins. So what is the consequences of leak of these blood vessels? Definitely the blood will come out from the blood vessels. To prevent this one, we have that inside the blood, along with the red blood cells, we have the platelets are the one which is helping to clot the blood, which is helping to loss of blood whenever we get that injury. And this is another subtopic. It's very important. There is a lymph. So most of the this entire classes, the chapter 5 life process, just I took that major key component or the major key concept from our NCERT textbook. So whenever I felt like the underlined keyword that another the different types of the text color which already asked in your previous board examination, try to focus on these underlined keywords. And here the next subtopic is the lymph. So here we can see that the lymph is that, even we can call it as the lymph as a tissue fluid. So what do you mean by the tissue fluid? The tissue fluid is the one definitely which is helping involved in the transportation. This is called the lymph or the tissue, lymph tissue fluid or the tissue fluid through the pores present the walls of the capillaries. Some amount of plasma, proteins, and the blood cells escape into intercellular spaces in the tissue to form the tissue fluid called the lymph. As we studied, like whenever I will show one picture. So this is the lymphatic capillaries or the lymphatic system. So whenever this portion is the cell, this portion which is connected by that veins and arteries. So before this veins again further divided into the small blood capillaries called that mm, blood vessels called the capillary, which is associated with the cell. So here that intercellular spaces, sometime whatever the fluid, whatever the gases, whatever the blood which is reaching here, there is a chance to escape from the intercellular spaces. That fluid which we can call it as lymph or tissue fluid. And here the function of the tissue fluid or the lymph is exactly the similar to the plasma, but it's a colorless and contain less protein, and it has definitely we can see the lymph drains into the lymphatic capillaries from the intercellular spaces, which joins to form large lymph vessels that finally open into the large veins. And what is the function of that lymph here? The lymph carries digested fat and absorbed fat from the small intestine and drains excess fluid from the extracellular spaces back to the blood. So the characteristics of the lymph, which is the colorless, mm, inside the lymph we can see some amount of the plasma and the protein, the blood cells called white blood cells, not red blood cells. This is all about the lymph. So here we can see the lymphatic system and the pictures. So the last one, the transportation in plants, this is also very important. As we know that we studied, we discussed earlier how the plants take the simple compounds such as carbon dioxide from the stomata, which will help in the photosynthesis, and by using that carbon dioxide, which will prepare that food. Just you can imagine that the food, whatever which is preparing inside that leaf, just you can see the food prepared here, but even the plant body in the down body also they need the food. How this how this food which is moving from the top to the bottom, and even we can see the source of the water and the minerals and that all the nitrogen, phosphorus and the other raw material which will be there in the soil. but how it is reaching to the tip of the root. So here the transportation in plants will takes place. The raw material needed for building the plant body will also have to be taken up separately. For the plants, the soil is the nearest and richest source of raw materials in the form of, like in the form of nitrogen, phosphorus, and other material. Definitely, the water inside that water, this all the material will be there, and this absorption of these substances therefore occurs through the parts in contact with the soil called the roots. The roots are the one which is helping to absorb that all the nutrients or the mineral from the soil to the plant by having the roots. Here we will see how exactly the water is moving from the soils to the all the parts of the body. Even that food, like we studied in the photosynthesis is the process which is helping to prepare their own food. So the food which will be there in the leaf, how that the food which is reaching to the each and every part of the body, we will learn here. Here the xylem moves, which is helping to transport the water and the mineral obtained from the soil. The xylem one, which is helping to transport that water from the soil to the plant body. And the other one, the phloem, transport the product of the photosynthesis. What is the product of the photosynthesis? Here, 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 the product of the photosynthesis will takes place in the green part. That is the starch or the glucose will reach to the each and every part of the body through the phloem. So here we have some of that important content, the transport of water. With this, we will wind up. In xylem tissue, as we know that which is composed with the vessels, tracheids of the roots, stems, and the leaves are interconnected to form continuous system of water conducting channel. So water conducting channel is creating by having that xylem. And at the roots, the cells in contact with the soil actively take up ions. So what is the purpose of taking this ion? This creates a difference in the concentration of these ions between root and the soil. Now, what would be the result of if it is ions are somewhere very high and somewhere very, just you can see the ions are here, so very uh, more percentage of the ions is here and the less percentage of the ions here. What will happen here? The differentiation will create. That differentiation will helps in means means that there is a steadily movement of water into the root xylem. It creates the column of water that is steadily pushed upwards. Means s- the down portion is very high concentration. The up portion is very less concentration. So the water will move from higher concentration to the lower concentration region. Means because of the differentiation. So here the transportation of the water from the soil to the root, which is helping to create the differentiation, then the water will move from the roots to the entire parts of the plant. So with this note, we are winding up the transportation in human beings and transportation in plants also. So here most important content is the parts of that heart. Okay, especially the function of pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, and along with that, blood vessels, arteries, and veins. And even you have to learn the lymphatic system or the lymph, and along with that, the transportation in plants regarding the xylem and phloem. So next class we will start with the next and the last subtopic in chapter 5 life processes, that is excretion. So thank you for watching. If you have any concern, any doubts, you can comment down. So I will read your concern or the comment. Definitely, I will react. Thank you for watching. Thank you.